Between 1984 and 1988, an undisclosed metro area in the southeastern United States suffered a spat of violent murders. The victims shared no commonalities. Age, gender, race, appearance, occupation, socioeconomic status, none of these factors matched between victims. The victim pool included middle school students and notorious cartel members, street cops and lawyers, charity directors and investment bankers, pharmaceutical executives, and gas station clerks. In fact, the only reason authorities had any idea that the murders were related at all was because of the killer's unique calling card, a scattering of blood-drenched pigeon feathers. As months passed and the body count mounted, law enforcement came into possession of one single piece of eyewitness testimony. Following the violent death of a firefighter, a middle-aged woman was spotted limping away from the scene, bleeding profusely from a gaping wound in her hip. According to the witness, the woman was tiny, almost bird-like in her thinness, and shuffling like someone elderly. Notably, a flock of pigeons followed her, bobbing along beside her like an urban adaptation of the Pied Piper. This sighting was ultimately dismissed, however, due to one detail: the fact that the woman was covered in gray feathers. A second sighting was reported 1 year later and was again dismissed. Similar sightings continued to crop up over the years, but every one of them was ignored. Then, in the summer of 1988, and entirely by chance, a bloody feather came into possession of the Agency of Helping Hands during the commission of a separate task. The feather was then brought to the Pantheon, where peculiarities surrounding the appearance and physiology of the feather were noted by specialized personnel, most notably T-Class Agent Christoph Wolf. At this point, the agency decided to launch an investigation of its own. The investigation culminated in September 1988. During surveillance of the target, who was indeed a very thin woman trailed by a flock of pigeons and who always wore a long, heavy trench coat, she managed to infiltrate a house that functioned as a front for human trafficking. What resulted was a bloodbath. The target was badly wounded and therefore sufficiently weakened due to the energy she expended during the attack. As a result, agency personnel were able to take her into custody. Her capture was not without incident, as the flock of pigeons surrounding her began to attack personnel. One pigeon, a particularly large male with one eye, refused to leave her side. As a result, the animal was brought into custody with her. He was later observed to pluck his feathers and place them on top of the woman's astounding number of serious wounds. And, incredibly, the feathers facilitated rapid healing. It must be noted that the woman came into agency custody during a time when consideration and respect for our extraordinary inmates was at a low ebb. Due to her dress, her age, her general appearance, and of course her flock of pigeons, personnel named the entity the Bag Lady. The Bag Lady is a middle-aged woman of almost extraordinary thinness. Her hair is short and gray. Her eyes are large and a vivid, bright orange color identical in hue to the eye of the pigeon who came into custody with her. Like the pigeon, she is covered in feathers. Unlike many of our inmates, the Bag Lady is articulate, intelligent, and possesses full speech and language capabilities. Nevertheless, for the entire length of her incarceration, the Bag Lady has refused to speak with staff for any meaningful length of time. When asked why, her answer is always the same: because I don't talk to cops. This is admittedly understandable, given that before her incarceration, the Bag Lady acted in an exclusively extrajudicial capacity to extremely violent effect. Despite decades of consistent questioning and other, less savory methods designed to break her down, the Bag Lady has continued to refuse meaningful engagement with agency personnel. In fact, the only meaningful contact the Bag Lady has had with personnel consists of attacks both attempted and achieved. On several different occasions, however, she has been observed attempting to engage fellow inmates in conversation. It should be noted that the bag lady speaks extensively and frequently to her pigeon. The pigeon doesn't answer, but agency personnel nevertheless believe that the bird is extraordinarily intelligent and that it communicates with the inmate nonverbally. Due to potential similarities with the inmate called the heartbird, the pigeon is as closely monitored as the bag lady herself. It should be noted that concerns over such similarities with the heartbird are the primary reason that the bag lady has never been evaluated for termination. Fortunately, the inmate's decades-long vow of silence was recently broken during an interview with T-Class agent Rochelle Bean. The insights provided are fascinating. The content of the interview poses serious questions regarding the nature of death, free will, the possibility and potential purpose of the afterlife, and the processes through which chthonic entities come into being. One might even dare to say it provides a few answers as well. As the interviewer in question, I would like to formally note that I did not write that last line. My boss added it because he's him. My name is Agent Rochelle Bean. I am a forensic interviewer employed by the Agency of Helping Hands, North American Special Containment Unit. Today I'm conducting an investigative interview with inmate 13 called the Bag Lady with the following classification string: uncooperative, undetermined, chthonic, fixed, critical, terras. Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle, and I'm here to talk to you today.
Too bad. I don't talk to cops.
Then you'll be glad to know I'm not a cop. Now, tell me what's on your mind, please.
First thing my son ever bought was birdseed. He was 4 years old. His grandma put $2 in his Christmas card that year, and he spent those dollars on pigeon food. Michael loved pigeons. He started talking to them before he ever said a word to me. Watched them from windows when he was a baby and cooed at them the way they cooed at each other. His first smile was for them, not at me. His first hello went to a baby pigeon blinking in a nest on our fire escape. He loved them. They loved him back. As he got older, that love grew. By the time he was in kindergarten, those birds would follow him everywhere, bobbing along after him. They ate out of his hands, flew down to his arms, sometimes even landed on his head, which made him laugh like nothing else. I've been afraid of birds my whole life, so I didn't understand. And I asked him one time why he loved them so much, how he could make friends with them. "It's easy, Mom," he said. "Pigeons think everyone's their friend. They already love you. All you do is love them back." I still didn't understand. Didn't really want to, I suppose. I grew up learning that pigeons were vermin. Dirty, ugly, unsanitary, brainless disease carriers. No, I didn't understand it at all. But I did understand this. Like pigeons, my son thought everyone was his friend. When describing Michael, you might use the word gullible. But that isn't right. He wasn't gullible. He was smart. He was intuitive. He understood everyone. He could look at the worst person alive and find the smallest, weakest spark of goodness flickering forlornly in the vast dark. What he couldn't understand, what I couldn't make him understand no matter how hard I tried, how loud I yelled, how mean or desperate or cruel I got, was that a spark is not light. A spark is just a spark, no more and maybe less. I could tell you about Michael's friends, how some were born monsters, how some were made, how badly the ones that were made, the ones that weren't born ruined, hurt my heart, and how that spark of sympathy got my guard down just enough to make sure I lost my son. I saw him for the last time when he was 17. We were fighting about his friends, not the pigeons. I'd gotten used to them a long time ago. How they clustered around the fire escape every morning waiting for him to open the window. how they flocked down to the building entrance when it was time for him to leave for work, how his favorite bird, Mr. One-Eye, dive-bombed onto his shoulders every time they saw each other. No, we weren't fighting about pigeons. We were fighting about his other friends. It wasn't even a bad fight. Not worse than any of our other fights anyway. It went the same way it always did. He told me I didn't understand like he always did. I told him he was being a little fool, and his friends would be the end of him, like I always did. And he walked out the door to cool off, like he always did. I thought he'd call a few hours later, apologizing and asking for an apology in return, like he always did. But he didn't call. I told myself he'd come home, but he didn't come home. And nobody cared. My boy never coming back was the worst thing, the very, very worst thing that is or was or will ever be. The fact that no one helped, that no one cared, that no one gave the tiniest spark of a damn was almost as terrible. I went to the police 17 times. 17. One for each year he'd been alive. Each one of those 17 times they told me Michael was basically an adult. We'd had a fight and he was fully in his rights not to come home. One cop even had the gall to tell me it was about time my son stopped coming home. Another one said I was lucky he was gone because otherwise he'd probably come back one day and cut my throat for drug money. The very last cop finally took pity on me. She was a lady officer. Maybe lady is the wrong word. She was a battle axe, built like a concrete watchtower with hair like rusty steel wool and the scariest eyes I've ever seen. But when she looked at me after taking my 17th report, there was nothing scary about her eyes. They were only tired, sad, and lightless. That look in her eyes was how I knew no one would ever find my son. And that was the scariest thing of all. "Listen to me, hon," she said. "This is going to sound like the worst thing in the world, because it is. But it's also the only true thing anyone in this department is going to tell you. We have almost no resources. The few resources we do have, they go to priorities. A dopehead dropout won't ever be a priority. And no one here gives a shit about people who aren't priorities. No one cares about your son but you." "You're wrong," I told her, even though I knew she wasn't. I didn't give up. I'll never give up on my boy. So I went to other places for help. Citizen groups, social services, activists, community foundations, charities, all those places. At first, it was wonderful. At first, I thought I'd found my people, because unlike the cops, they listened. They listened when I told them about my son, about how the first thing he ever bought was birdseed, and how the first word he ever said was for a baby pigeon, and how Mr. One-Eye rode on his shoulder, and how he could look at the worst person alive and find the good in them. They listened to me, and they gave me hugs and coffee and cookies and prayers and recommendations to grief groups, and then they listened again. But they didn't do anything. Not once, not ever did they do anything about it. Finally, I'd had enough of people who didn't do anything about it. When I said so to one of the group leaders, the one who was the best listener, the one who held my hands whenever I cried, said, "We're your people. We're here for you. We care about you." Grief and rage and frustration erupted out of me. The most acute, potent frustration I'd ever felt. The kind that renders you mindless. And I said, "I need you to care about my son." She just said, "I understand, Amina. I hear you." "Then do something about it," I said. This lady answered, "I have been. I am. I'm always here for you. I'm listening." "But," I asked her, "but what?" She looked at me tiredly, so tiredly. Then she said, "We only have as much as we have. We can only do what we can with what we have. What else do you want me to do?" "Something," I said. "Anything." But she didn't. No one did. No one but me. And I kept on keeping on. Not because I wanted to, but because sometimes that's all you get. The ability to put one foot in front of the other. Left, right, until you get somewhere else. Only I couldn't get anywhere else. The pigeons couldn't either. They didn't seem to understand that Michael was gone. As the days after his disappearance bled into weeks, and the weeks hemorrhaged into months, the pigeons kept coming, flocking to the fire escape outside our little window, waiting for him to pop up with smiles and birdseed. His favorite pigeon, Mr. One-Eye, even took to following me whenever I left the building. He watched me as if to say, "Where is he? Where did he go? Tell him we're waiting. Tell him we love him. Tell him we need him to come back." I couldn't help but wonder how those birds were feeling. If they were just confused and maybe a little hurt in their little bird brains, or if they understood. If they hurt as much as me. If they had holes in their hearts like me. Rotting, bottomless voids eating them from the inside out every second of every day. But I didn't know how to ask. They wouldn't know how to answer anyway. And then Mr. One-Eye stopped showing up. He stayed gone for 1 day, then 2, then 3, and 4, and 5. And that's when I knew he wasn't coming back either. I hated that damn bird for leaving me. He was Michael's favorite. Michael had pigeons the way I'd had dogs, and that particular pigeon was his heart. Mr. One-Eye was the closest thing my sweet boy had to a soulmate. So if even that bird had given up on him, he was truly gone. The 6th day after Mr. One-Eye's absence was gray and wet and felt dead somehow. Rain sheeted from the sky, but without any ferocity, without any power. It felt tired, hopeless, helpless to stop itself from falling. I was kicking my way home from work, tired and helpless as the rain. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to come home from work either. I didn't want to walk, but I was still walking. Eyes down, 1 foot in front of the other, left, right, left, right. All rain could do was fall. Gray rain on gray streets. All I could do was walk. Gray girl on gray streets. And then, out of the corner of my eye, so colorful, it was almost obscene, I saw something. Brightness against the rain-slick concrete, a small explosion of white and gray and sloppy wet red. I almost ignored it. 1 foot in front of the other because that's all you can do. Left, right, left, right. Shoes slapping the sidewalk, dull and pointless, gray and empty. But that explosion of white and red didn't stay an explosion. It began to resolve, to take form. And the form it took was blood-caked feathers. Blood-caked feathers on a crumpled gray chest shimmering all pink and green and white as it panted. A pigeon. A pigeon some asshole had kicked out of the way or maybe even stepped on and left to die. A pigeon who hadn't run away from danger because it thought everyone was its friend. And what friend would ever be a danger? I'd never seen anything so pathetic. I almost left it. But then I thought of Michael. I couldn't bear to leave it there. As I approached it, something bloomed in my chest. A feeling. I couldn't figure out what that feeling was. Only that it was suffocating me. So I stopped to catch my breath, and I looked at that pigeon. It looked back with a single orange eye, fever bright and fading even as I watched. It turned its head weakly. And that's when I saw it was missing an eye. The sheer weight of grief forced me to my knees. But that weight couldn't keep me from crawling across the gray, flooded sidewalk. It couldn't keep me from scooping up that bright, bloody explosion with desperate tenderness. It couldn't keep me from cradling that Mr. One-Eye to my chest like I'd cradled my son a lifetime ago. I sat there in the rain until after night fell, sobbing and holding the bird to my heart long after he stopped moving. People passing by took me for homeless. A few dropped coins into my lap. One lady even knelt down and tried to coax me to a shelter down the road till I screamed in her face and spat. No one stopped to help me after that. At some point, I stood up and staggered home. I brought Mr. One-Eye with me, holding him to my heart all the while. I got drunk that night. Blind, stinking, hideously drunk. Not because I like drinking. I hate it. But I hated having to feel the hole in my heart more. That rotting void. A bottomless chasm eating me from the inside out every second of every day. It felt like I should be dead. Only I wasn't. I feel like I was always dying but never got to be dead. Dead would have been better, but I couldn't die. If I died, then there would be no one on earth who cared what happened to my baby boy. So I got drunk instead of dead. I didn't really think it would work. I hoped that it would. I always hope. Hope is the only thing some of us ever get. But being drunk didn't work. Being drunk just made me angrier and crazier. Being drunk made the rotting pit inside me grow up and out until it was swallowing me whole. Until it was the only thing in the world. Until it was the only thing I knew, the only thing I'd ever known, the only thing I would ever know. I thought I was by myself in that void, till I looked out the window and saw the pigeons on the fire escape. They alone were there in the pit with me. They alone understood. They alone cared what happened to my son. So I opened the window by the fire escape and told them to come inside. They swirled up in a panic, wings thundering. No, I wept. No, don't leave, come in. Come in here, you goddamn morons, come in. I reached for him. Everything tilted. The metal windowsill bit into my belly, then scraped down my legs as the world flipped upside down. The last thing I knew was the rush of wings, deafening, but soft. Beautifully, perfectly, profoundly soft. For the first time that I could remember, I woke up in somebody's arms. I opened my eyes. A face looked down at me. An old man with round golden eyes and the gentlest smile I'd ever seen. Pigeons surrounded us, a shifting, bright-eyed flock so huge it spilled off the sidewalks and into the street. Their eyes shone like embers in the dark. I looked back at the man. His eyes shone too, and so did the skin of his face. He wasn't human. He couldn't be. For some reason, that didn't frighten me at all. Who are you? I asked. Are you an angel? No, he said. I am one who listens. It sounds ridiculous, but I could literally hear the big letters in that title. Those words came out of his mouth, capitalized. The one who listens to what? I asked. He said back, I listen to prayers. I listen to pain. I listen to rage. I listen to yours, you know. He smiled again, teeth shimmering. I shifted, groaning as electric pain bolted up my hip. Then I asked him, if you listened to me, why didn't you ever answer? He said, because we who listen can never answer loudly. Sometimes we cannot answer at all. Each answer, however soft and quiet, takes from us. Often it takes something we aren't supposed to give. Always, it gives something we can never get back. See? He held out his bare arms for my inspection. My stomach churned as the streetlight illuminated a relief map of pitted scars and worm-like welts and suppurated rotten pits like radiation burns. What happened? I asked. I listened, he said, and I answered. He shook his silvery sleeves back down over his arms. My answers took what I did not have in me to give. Frustration bubbled up hot and poisonous. If you can't do anything, then what's the point? There is no point, I think, he said gently. It simply is. I repeated, are you a guardian angel? He said, we're not guardians. We are listeners. I asked, who is we? Me? He placed a hand on his chest. You? He pressed his other hand against my chest. We. I looked at him, revolted as terror built in my gut, and asked, am I dead? He said, there is no death for us. I answered, I'm sorry, but I do not understand this. He put his hand on mine and explained, we who were suffering, we who were once alone, now go to others who are suffering and alone. We stay with them and we listen. We listen so they can feel comfort. I had so many questions, but could barely articulate a single one. All that came out of my mouth was, so you saw my pain, all that rage, heard all those questions? Yes, he said. Well, I never felt you, is what I told him. All he said was, I know. Sometimes that is the way it is. But still, we try. Still, we do what we must do. I sat up and snapped. You said you answered. That's why you're hurt. Because you didn't just listen, you gave answers to someone. Who? And why wasn't it me? Before he could tell me, I looked down at my hands. Incredibly, I was still holding Mr. One-Eye. Even more incredibly, he was still alive. His poor sunken eye fixed me with a dulled orange gaze. Something shot me in the heart. The force of a freight train burning just like a bullet boring through me. Instead of smoke, it left a question in its wake, spoken in a voice that wasn't mine. Hurts. Stop it. Stop it hurting. Stop. Please. Without thinking, only feeling, I cradled Mr. One-Eye to my chest and held him. Pain erupted in my shoulder, overwhelming and familiar. The rotting void, endless and eternal, boring a tunnel out of my core and manifesting as a caving wound. But this time, it didn't spread. It didn't grow. It didn't swallow me up in the world surrounding. It didn't become the only thing I had known or the only thing I knew or the only thing I would ever know. It stayed where it was, confined to its tunnel. It had no choice, because there was something more important in my hands. Something bright and living, something alive and whole. Mr. One-Eye shifted his wings, then stretched upward. I raised him so he could look at me. His beautiful, sparkling orange eye met mine. Then he stretched out, beak catching the fabric of my coat, and climbed onto my shoulder. And for the first time since my son was born, I felt whole. He who listens wasn't quite so thrilled. "What have you done?" he wailed. Tears welled up in his great yellow eyes as he stared at the ghastly wound in my arm. I stared too. I couldn't help it. It looked as rotten as it felt. A huge, ruptured wound tunneling through my arm. "It will never go away," he said. "It will never fade. It will only grow. You will have that wound and feel that pain growing until it finally consumes you." Before I could say a word, Mr. One-Eye flapped his wings. The feathers whacked my face, shockingly strong. Immediately, the pigeons around us came in a bobbing gray wave, pooling where I stood, where they began to preen. As I watched, they dropped their preen feathers, glistening, shimmering gray, overlaid with every color of the rainbow, at my feet. When the last pigeon had dropped the last feather, Mr. One-Eye tucked his head under his wing and pulled out a feather of his own. Then he crept his way down my arm, one foot in front of the other. Left, right, and placed his feather inside my wound. The feather lay atop it for a moment, shining. Then it melted into that rotting crater, leaving a delicate thread of whole, unblemished flesh stretched across the hole. I reached down and grabbed the pile of feathers at my feet, stuffing it into the hole. It was like magic. It was magic. Each feather shone and melted into fresh flesh. 2 handfuls later, there was no wound. After 3, there wasn't even a scar. By the end, even the pain was gone. I laughed. It felt alien to laugh, rusty, even wrong. But it came out anyway, erupting like a geyser. As I laughed, he who listens wept. "No," he moaned. "No, no, no. What are you doing? This is wrong." Tears fell from his great yellow eyes, shining like diamonds under the streetlights. Suddenly, I felt guilty. "I'm sorry," I lied. "I didn't know. I won't do it again." His face broke apart and he cried, "You are lying and you don't even know it. If I show you what we do, you will ruin everything." That actually offended me. So I said, "Then don't show me anything. It's not like I asked." "I have no choice," he sniffled. "I must do what I must do. You will do what you will do. Come." He toddled down the street. I hesitated for reasons I still don't understand. Then I followed. So did the pigeons. He who listened spun around. "No, they cannot. They cannot." On my shoulder, Mr. One-Eye beat his wings again, whipping my face. The other pigeons obediently dispersed. He who listens continued to argue with me about Mr. One-Eye, but I held my ground. People say you're forever responsible for what you tame. I didn't tame Mr. One-Eye, but I saved him. I think that makes me even more responsible for him, and I said so. "Oh no," he who listens wept. "No, this is wrong. You will be wrong. What am I to do?" I stood up straight as I could, and I said, "You are to show me what you're supposed to show me, or leave." He just kept crying. "I cannot leave. I have no choice." "Then let's get going," I said. He wiped tears from his face and flicked them onto the concrete where they spattered like silvery rain. And as we moved down the street, I saw people who hadn't been there just a few minutes ago. But they all looked like they'd been there for hours. languishing in the alleys, spread eagle on the sidewalks, leaning against buildings as sobs shook their bony shoulders. As we drew closer, one turned to look at us. Wide yellow eyes glimmered in its round face. A rotting wound glistened under its nose. The flesh of its lips had been eaten to the bone, exposing the teeth. I asked, "These people, do they listen? Are they all like you?" "No," he sobbed. "They're like you. They did not listen. They answered. They gave too much. They gave what they couldn't get back." We walked in silence after that. I avoided his yellow eyes glistening like coins in the night. He who listened spent all night showing me what to do. Not once, not twice, or 3 times, but 17 times. Once for each year of my son's life. The first time was a homeless man huddled under a bench in the park. He was sobbing in his sleep, and his face, weathered but unmistakably young, made my heart ache. "Sit," said he who listens. I asked, "What if he wakes up?" "He will not," he said. "Sit and touch him." When I laid my hand on that boy, I felt his yammering heartbeat and saw his pain. I heard it. Worse, I felt it. I felt every terrible step in the tragic procession that led him here. Steps that were his fault and steps that weren't. It didn't even matter what was his fault or what wasn't. All that mattered was his pain. Even though I couldn't take that pain from him, his heart slowed the longer I sat with him. By the end, its rhythm was calm and steady. Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought his poor weathered face looked a little less sad, too. "Yes," he who listens said happily. "That is what we do. We listen, and we provide comfort with our listening." Next, we went to a lady sitting in a roach-infested studio apartment, hollow-eyed and expressionless, as she stared at her blank television screen. "Kneel," said he who listens. "Won't she see me?" I asked. He said, "Not tonight. Kneel and hold her hand." I did as I was told. Once again, I heard and saw and felt the most terrible things. Rotting things. Things that get inside you and bore tunnels until they kill you. I don't know how long I sat with her, but I know that by the end, her eyes had closed and she was finally sleeping. We saw a child next, alone and wide awake in a foster home crying for her father. Then a young mother weeping in her kitchen. An old man in a nursing home. A teenage boy stomping his way down an empty street while tears coursed down his face. A young woman sobbing by herself in a dark office long after everyone else had gone home. It might have been a single night. It might have been a week, or a month, or forever, or 10 minutes. Finally, we went to a hospital where a man, balding and exhausted, sat at the bedside of a little girl with sunken eyes and dull, dying skin. I knew she would be gone by morning because when I touched her, I felt only the faintest veil of emotion, all of it warm and soft. So I turned to the father. I didn't sit this time. I leaned over him the way I used to lean over my son whenever he cried and wrapped my arms around him. His pain hit me with the force of a tsunami, repulsive and powerful, and with it a plea that echoed in my blood and bones. Help. 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 I can't lose her. She deserves more. She's all I have. Help her. Help her. The sheer force crushed my chest and punched through my heart, wide as a freight train, hot as a bullet, painful as death by acid bath. The man cried out. I thought I'd heard him. I recoiled, speaking an apology he couldn't hear, but he only lurched forward, reaching for the child on the bed. Her eyes were open and color was returning to her face. "What have you done?" screamed he who listens. I staggered back, gasping as the wound in my chest pulsed and blood dripped down my chest, soaking my dirty shirt. He shrieked, "You've given what you cannot give back. It will consume you." I barely listened. Single-minded purpose filled me, and I knew in the depths of my missing, punched-out heart that I had to get outside right now. Somehow I did. The pigeons were waiting for me, an entire flock on the sidewalk, eyes knowingly glittering. Mr. One-Eye flapped his wings in command. The pigeons obeyed him, dropping their plucked feathers at my feet. I packed them into my wound. New flesh grew, bright and shimmering as the feathers themselves. It took longer this time, but that wound healed too. "No!" wept he who listens. No, you cannot do this. You cannot. You are an abomination. I had a vivid mental image of he who listens kneeling at my side, stroking my hair, my hands, holding my face as I wept and raged with no knowledge of his presence. Again, I wondered, what was the point of it? No, I told him. The abomination is being able to help people, being able to do something but choosing to do nothing. He told me, you are not one who listens. You are only a monster. You're wrong, I shot back. I'm one who listens and does something about it. He left me and didn't come back. That was all right. I didn't need him. I only needed the pigeons. I listened everywhere to everything and everyone and all their heartbroken, rage-filled, desperate questions. I didn't answer all of them. I learned that some people don't need answers. Many don't even deserve them. There are more of those than I have ever thought possible. But some did, and I always answered those. I didn't know what I was. All I knew was that I was more than I had ever been, more than myself. And I knew that I was powerful. I even started to wonder if I was a god. Under the circumstances, I think that was a reasonable thing to wonder. But whether I was a god or not, I could still only be in one place at a time. That's why I needed the pigeons. Pigeons can only be in one place too, but there are so many of them that they're already everywhere. I asked them to listen. They answered me. Because they answered me, I was able to answer so many others. I answered a boy being beaten by cops as a flock of pigeons watched from the roofs above. His dog lay beside him, bleeding from bullet holes and panting raggedly. The boy was holding his dog even though the cops kept kicking his hands to try and make him let go. He begged for help. He asked for his mother. He asked for his father. He told his dog she was a good girl as she whined, blood spreading across the dirty concrete. Still, they beat him. So I struck them down. One cracked open right there on the sidewalk. I took his gun and shot the other while he stirred feebly. The boy looked at me exhausted and horrified in equal measure and began to pray. I knew he was praying to God, probably to stop me from coming any closer. But I pretended he was praying to me anyway. I kneeled down and placed my hands on his poor whining dog. Don't hurt me, the boy begged as agony tumbled through my belly, rotten and corrosive and vile. Please, she's a good girl. I know, I told him, then touched his forehead the way I touched my son's when he'd been running a fever. Another bolt of pain shot through my hand. I saw the wound form this time, watched it cave through my palm and spread like rot. The dog got to her feet and nuzzled her owner, tail wagging even as she whined. The boy looked at me wide-eyed and ashen. What are you? I didn't know how to answer, and to be honest, I didn't want to. I hobbled my way out of the alley. The pigeons followed me down a side street and into a narrow little park where Mr. One-Eye gave his wing-flapping, face-slapping order. The feathers came, and with it healing. The birds kept listening, and I kept answering. My birds once found a woman frozen in fear, huddling as a man with dead eyes bore down on her. I tore his head off. She ran before I could put my hands on her to take away her fear. They found a flea-bitten baby boy in a sodden, sagging diaper, screaming for help in a filthy crib while his parents nodded off in an equally filthy corner. I answered the baby, but I punished them. They found a girl in a group home as she slid a blade up and down her arms and begged for the person who should have done everything to protect her but destroyed her instead to die. I answered. They found an old woman with a black eye pushing an empty cart along broken sidewalks, asking for someone to please bring her belongings back. They're all I have in the world, she wept. Please bring them back. I answered her, but not before punishing the thieves. They found a man sobbing alone in his car, silently pleading for money to feed his kids for the next 3 days. Just the next 3 days. Please, God. I answered. My answer was taken from someone else, but it was given. They found a mother sobbing for help over her son's blue body, a needle still quivering in his arm. I answered her too. Afterward, I found the man who sold her son the drugs. Then I found the people who sold that man the drugs. And then I found the people who gave them the drugs. And those people were no more. I answered pleas against criminals and cops and schoolyard bullies, masked monsters, petty thieves, people who inflicted damage by action and people who inflicted damage by inaction. Dozens, then hundreds, then more, and more, and more. Every answer took from me. I think every answer continued to take. Maybe it's because I've given so many answers and now they all help each other grow. My answers took and take what I can never get back. Even the birds couldn't give back everything I gave. But they gave me enough. Right up until the day your people found me. That was my fault. God works best in mysterious ways, especially when those ways are small. I'm still mysterious, but I forgot to stay small. I will never make that mistake again. My birds still bring me questions, you know. They're outside right now, on your walls, your roof, your ground, whispering to each other, whispering to Mr. One-Eye, whispering to me. I hear them, even down here. They aren't perfect. Nobody is. Some questions don't have answers, and some answers can't be found. My son was one of those. We tried to find him. My pigeons worked as hard as I ever did, harder maybe. We couldn't find him. But my boy, he would understand. My boy, he saw the good in everyone and everything, and so wherever he is, he sees the good in us, not finding him. Because while looking for him, searching for an answer, any answer at all, we were able to give other people the answers they needed. You know about those answers. That's why I'm here. I love these birds as much as my son ever did. Maybe more. I think more. I feel him in them sometimes, or at least I imagine that I do. Holding pigeons, teaching pigeons, loving pigeons isn't like having my son back. Nothing will ever be like having him back. But it is the closest thing I have. It's all I have. And in the end, what we have is all we get. Sometimes I'm the only thing someone gets. Well, me and the birds. My son knew what he was talking about. These birds are wonderful. They really do think everyone is their friend. They love being held, love being taught, love being loved. They love to help, and they love to listen. Now, I love to listen too. I'm listening right now. I hear them, even down here in my cell. I hear the people begging for help, the people who need answers, the people who just need someone to do something. I hear their pain. I hear their rage. And that's why you can't keep me here forever, no matter how hard you try. Because hearing the suffering of people who need my help gives me power, and I still hear every minute of their suffering. I hear the children who beg for help. I hear the fathers who cry for justice. I hear the mothers who demand vengeance. I hear because I am one who listens, and I answer because I'm the one who does something about it.